Hey, I believe it is 4 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. We'll move into agenda changes. I do not believe we have any. We do not have an executive session as of right now. Am I correct?
Yes, no executive session, but there is an addendum that was posted up about an hour ago. Includes the discussion and approval for a capital project update, and we're adding a contingency budget discussion along with the unreserved fund balance projection.
I'm sorry, I forgot. I got it right here in front of me. Did all the board members get that addendum?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Guest recognition. Do we have any guests on with us? I know Gary's with us.
Gary's been nice enough to change his calendar to join us for the discussion and approval of the capital project update a little bit later.
Okay.
Just a reminder, if you could mute if we're not talking directly, it might help with some of the feedback in the background.
All right. Moving on to items 4, 5, and 6. I'll entertain a motion to approve those 3. Would anybody like to make it? Beth, I have a second.
I'll second. Jim.
Jim second. Any discussion or questions on those 3 items? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Bob, did I get a thumbs up? I just got you in the picture. Bob? Were you?
Yes, he gave a thumbs up, Rodney.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. I thought you were frozen on my screen. All right. So that passed 5-0. Moving on to items for board discussion and or adoption. They'll let Ryan take over on this one. It's the memorandum of agreement with the ATA. So Ryan?
Yep. So this is one that we've been talking about, the settlement with the ATA in terms of the spring program and stipend. The recommendation from Mike Farrell was that because it involves money, that the Board of Education should recognize that the memorandum was committed. You should have received a copy of that in your packet. So Mike Farrell, because there's money involved, Mike Farrell suggested that the board approve the actual amendment to the additional supplement to the.
Okay, so then we need a motion to approve. Someone like to make it?
I'll make it.
Julie?
I'll second.
Beth? Any discussion or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Anybody opposed? No. Pass 5-0. Thanks, Ryan. Item B is the approval of the National Honor Society bylaws. It was in your packet, page 22 through 37. I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to look at that, or does anybody want to make a comment on that? Any of the administrators or?
I just wanted to.
Well, Mr. Wagner, do you want an opportunity to bring that off the page a little bit?
Sure. So you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Over the school year, the officers and our advisor, Mrs. Eklund, have been working on revising the bylaws. The main drive behind that was just to get a little bit more student ownership over all of the activities and responsibilities that NHS members have. I think the shift is more from we've made it to NHS to we've made it to NHS, and now we're responsible to this organization to do these certain leadership activities and take part in these service activities. So that was a driving force behind the changes, and I think the students did a really nice job, and the officers did a nice job leading that work into revising the bylaws and putting some new changes in place to help with that student leadership component.
Beth, I know you had a question.
I didn't have a question. I really appreciate when there are changes that we get a document that highlights those changes. It kind of brings us right, the point on what is different. So I appreciated that.
Great.
that highlighted document. And it provided a lot of good clarification. I thought the kids did a fabulous job on their video explaining.
Yeah.
So again, kudos to that review team. They did a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, we had some really motivated officers this year, and you transform some of the practices, especially with some of the service leadership and just kind of taking ownership of student ownership of that organization. So it's been a good year. It's too bad we couldn't finish it out with the blood drive.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions before I entertain a motion to approve it? Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make it.
Bob, have a second? Who seconded, Beth or Julie? Julie. All right, any further discussion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one opposed. Passed 5-0. All right, moving on to item C. It's one of our addendum items. Discussion on the budget. Is Kristen leading us on this, or Ryan, are you kicking it off?
Kristen can take it over. We have two items here. It's the unreserved fund balance status, so just an update on where we're at. Then the second one is a discussion around contingency budget planning. We haven't had a whole lot of opportunity to talk about what the implications of if the budget were to go down, what that would look like. So, Kristen, I'll turn it over to you in terms of the unreserved fund balance projection.
Okay, in your board packet is my memo and then some supporting documents attached. And I know it does look rather high, but it's because we're being conservative with our expenditures now, because we do not know, DiNapoli is talking about possibly taking some of our aid for this year, which I wasn't even thinking of. And then, of course, next year could be 14 to 20% reduction in state aid. Anything that we have left over that we can put into reserves would be really important to be able to keep us solvent into the future. And then I also said in the report that we'd be recommending the transfer to TRS reserve. We already made one last year because it was the first time the reserve was created and approved. So we definitely want to transfer money to there, because with TRS, we know they'll be going up, and we want to be able to fund that as much as possible. And we usually do a bus purchase with cash. If the taxpayers approve the purchase of the bus, we usually transfer money to the reserve. Did I forget anything, Ryan?
No, I don't think so.
No, it's all right there.
Anybody have any questions on fund balance as we start to finish up the year? Again, we won't know those exact numbers until probably August, September, Kristen?
Yeah, late August.
Yep.
And the other thing is we can't transfer any funds into any capital reserves other than the technology one, because our capital reserves equipment or our building have either expired, meaning we can no longer put money into it. We can use it, but we can't put money into it, or we've reached the thresholds of where they were set. So because we had so many propositions we're voting on this year, we didn't want to add another one for capital reserve. So we'll be looking for that next year.
Questions? Board members have any questions?
No.
Everyone good?
Well laid out.
Okay, so what I know about the contingency budget is this year is there will be no, usually you can get a second vote. If the budget goes down, you get a second vote. And in the fact that we sent out 5,000 plus ballots, we don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully the community will support us as they have in the last 20 some years. So, but if it doesn't go down, my understanding is through the state is there will not be time to do a second vote. We possibly couldn't we couldn't do anything. So if it goes down, we're into contingency budget right off the bat. So Kristen wants to explain what contingency is. I think we're fortunate because we're only 0.67% higher than last year, but make sure that I'm correct. So I'll let Kristen go ahead and tell you what happens if we go down.
So one of the things that we're supposed to eliminate is payments for community services. So that would include the lifeguards and the weight room supervisor that we have. That totals about almost $19,000, so that would have to come out. And then the other thing that we would need to take out is the capital outlay project, because the public has to approve the use from the reserve and the expenditure. So if they're voting down the budget, that those two things really come out. And the other thing that's not appealing is that our tax levy cannot go up. It has to be the same as last year. So that's $196,000 difference for us. So really what they say for contingency expenses is everything to continue operations of the facilities and things for students like transportation and anything that affects the health and welfare of the students.
Right. So because we're taking money out of the budget to do the capital outlay project, is the reason why we got to take it out if it goes down, correct?
Yes,
I mean, if it was a separate proposition and it passed and the budget failed, the proposition still go forward, right?
Yeah.
So in addition to that, my understanding, Kristen, is what we would be left with is approximately another $175,000 gap that we would have to close in some way, shape, or form after those moves are automatic. We've done some, as you know, we've done some preliminary planning about what a disastrous budget might look like. So we would have to come back around the table and figure out how to reduce those expenses.
Well, it's 175
cover those expenses.
Does 175 count the stuff that we can't do? I mean, those things we can't do, there's money involved there. We don't have to replace that money because we can't do it, correct?
So, right. So if we reduce revenues by the 196,000 for the tax levy and take 100,000 because we were going to transfer that from the capital reserve, and then we subtract out community services and the expense of the capital outlay project, we still have 178,000 to cut.
Okay. I was afraid you were going to say that.
I know, it's not pretty. And I've never experienced a contingency budget. I'm knocking on wood. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed.
We haven't either, I don't think. We had one go down 21 years ago, but then it passed the second time around. So
yep.
I think Maya can tell us if it did or didn't, though. You remember that one, Maya?
No, we don't want any bad mojo from this. So let's.
Yeah, let's not talk. We're done talking about it.
Well, Gary said he's already voted to pass it, so that means it's passed.
Yeah.
I think the next action might impact Gary's vote, so I think we need to proceed cautiously here.
Okay. So does anybody else have any questions on contingency? Understand it won't be pretty because we have to go down. I mean, I thought it was fortunate that we only went up 0.67, but didn't realize that the capital outlay money and all that other parts had to come out also. So.
Well, I think in the budget presentation, I think you really should stress that those two items, especially community service, that's a biggie to get turned down, as we always have in the past. But this year is really important, I think.
Putting a lot of weight on Ryan's shoulders now, Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I think just even mentioning, like you just did, that we don't have that second vote, that people, hopefully will think long and hard and be supportive of us so that we don't have to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
because I think people always think, oh, there's another vote. We can,
Yeah, we normally don't speak of it. I mean, but I guess maybe we should say what happens if the budget should fail. Normally we would have a second vote, but with the governor changing everything, the second vote date is, I think, is it July or?
It would be into July if it allowed for the 3 weeks.
So
I think Maya might resign if we have to do a second vote. So let's just hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. George, can I make a proposal that maybe we jump to F when you're ready to do the next item so that we can have Gary? Gary's been nice enough to give us his time, and we've got a couple of discussions after that and not making him wait till the end. I really want that yes vote.
Okay. All right. So
You have my yes vote either way. It doesn't matter.
we will skip D and E for now, and we'll move into F, capital project change order for the site work not to exceed 147,000. So want to give us a little history. My understanding is someone stole all our base and we have to put new down. But,
I know.
So I'll just give a quick intro. In doing the site work, some issues were uncovered in terms of the paving and what the preparation work that needs to be done before the paving would really be solid. Gary has taken his time and he sent me a nice email about it, but rather than me translate, he was nice enough to volunteer his time to come and give us an overview of what's going on and what are the proposed solutions. So I'll give it over to you on that, Gary.
Okay, thank you. So the contractor Bayside Paving, per contract, took off the layer of asphalt that was out on the original parking lot in front of the transportation building. And then also as part of the capital project, we're building the new bus storage area behind the old bus storage building. And all the topsoil was removed from there as well. Once we did that, the ground, we call it pumping. It's when you walk on it and the ground starts to undulate and move. And myself, even a 165-pound person walking on it, it was moving. And it's not that. So we did an excavation and discovered that it was topsoil in the ground underneath that pavement, ranging anywhere from 18 inches deep to 4 feet deep. And that's significant. And it's rather rich, dark. In any other place in your garden, it would be a beautiful topsoil, but it's in the wrong place for a parking lot or a building. You can't put a parking lot on topsoil and you can't put a building on topsoil. It has to go away. It's not structurally sound. So in the last good week, there's been a lot of people, EDR, your soil and site engineer, Dan Donovan from Ashley McGraw, myself, SJB, your independent testing agent, the contractor, all of us have been putting our heads together to do. The costs ranged from about 145,000 to 300, almost 350,000 to take care of this topsoil out there. We even brought a vendor in who has a product, and it's a GeoGrid system that's supposed to bridge bad soils like this. We finally got to a point, actually, it came down to today, and I had an epiphany this morning as literally as walking my dog down Driving Park. It's like, wait a minute, last year we did the entry road and the bus loop at the high school, and we had a bunch of stuff, and we were looking for 3-inch, and what the soil engineer wanted to do was use 3-inch cobbles to help us mitigate this soft soil, and the cost for a 3-inch cobble is very expensive. So I realized, wait a minute, we just got rid of a bunch of it last year. So I called Tom LeGroux, asked him if he could make a quick call to the village and ask if we could have it all back. Tom did. Within a few minutes, I got a call back. The village said yes. The village was very gracious. So fast forward, we went back to the contractor and said, what if we could use the stone at SJB, actually go down to the park and look at it, it was usable. So now we eliminated it. Unfortunately, there's not enough there to do everything we need to do, but it helps soften the blow. So right now I'd like to give the contractor direction to go down to the park as early as tomorrow, start pulling all that stone out, bring it back up to the school, and we'll use that in conjunction with the GeoGrid system that bridge. We're gonna have to take about 12 inches of topsoil out, we'll leave the rest of it. This GeoGrid can bridge the rest of it. We can put the stone in and build it back up. The soil engineers have looked at it, SJB, testing agencies looked at it, engineers have looked at it. It's based on their recommendation that we do this. I got a quote within about 2 hours before this meeting from the contractor to do that. The hourly rates are completely in line with today's rates for prevailing wage work. It's $72,900, but that's just to do the parking area in front of the transportation. I still do the parking area behind the bus storage. In consultation with everybody in the last couple hours, our worst case scenario we're thinking shouldn't be any higher than $60,000 to do that area. So we're landing in around that 130 to 140 range all in which is about half of my construction contingency. And that's why we have construction contingencies is for this reason, for finding for things that we don't know exist. Now, the engineer did do 2 soil borings, one in front of behind the bus storage building. Both borings showed there was soft material, but it didn't identify it as topsoil. So you're asking a 6-inch boring hole to tell you what's happening on 2.5 acres of land. It gives you an idea, but it's not anywhere perfect. So the question is, why didn't the soil borings show it? They don't always prove out. Unfortunately, soil borings don't always prove out to give us all the information we need. So they did not this time. So what happened, I think, years and years ago, go back 40, 50 years, when that area was developed, they left the topsoil there, or they dumped it in there. It was a low spot and filled it in, and then they put pavement over the top of it. That was, now we're stuck with the sense of the past, and that's where we are today. I hope I did a good job explaining that. Going down the rabbit hole.
Gary, you said we did do the bore test
Yes.
prior.
There were two.
We did do the bore test.
Yes, there were 2 done out in that area. Yes, okay. And they showed soft material, but they didn't show the depth of the topsoil that we're finding in various areas. And they say that the topsoil ranges. It's a large area, but it ranges from about 18 inches to about 4 feet. And underneath that topsoil is a clay lens, rather than deep clay lens, which is fine, but it's the topsoil that's the problem.
Okay. The other question I have for you is, you're saying we're pulling 12 inches of topsoil off. I don't know how many yards that. Do we have a place for that, or can we sell that to try and cover some of the cost?
We are saving money again because we had the good fortune to be able to dispose of it off site. We met with Tom last week and walked out back behind the soccer fields, and there's still space out there where we can remove it. The costs get really expensive when we have to load it in 10-yard dump trucks and haul it off site and take it somewhere. That's when it gets very, very expensive. So we can avoid all that by disposing of it on site.
Okay. I didn't know if disposing of it, but I was thinking if we could sell it, someone could come take it.
Oh, maybe. Because the other thing, what they're going to do is we're going to put it and spread it between the softball field and the road that goes out to the lake road fields. And it's going to be spread out over that, because right now that's a bony, rocky area. It once was woods. And when the woods was cleared, there wasn't much that could be done with it. So what can happen is the topsoil can be spread over that. We could probably put a good herd on that and create a new lawn area or whatever the district would want to use with that space. Take advantage. Because really, it's unusable right now, that area. You can't really use it.
I was just thinking if we didn't have a use for it, then if we could sell it, that sounds like a good use for it. So
yeah, that's going to be the first place we put it. And if we end up needing more space, then we can put it behind the soccer fields. And we've done that over the last 20 years. When we have these events, we've been putting it behind the soccer field and just extending the soccer field. If you recall, in the last big project, that's how we built that softball field. We took all the material from the old turf field area and the pond area and put it up there, and wound up building a base for your softball field, which saved the district a boatload of money.
Gary, quick follow-up in terms of after we do the stone run and was it the geotech material you called it, and the paving will go in, is that still going to be fully guaranteed then? Work?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Yeah. And what I want to do, just as my recommendation, is what I would want to do is get the stoning done now, and then we'll do the paving in August before school starts. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is if some area fails, we haven't paved over it yet, and we can dig it out, box it out, and fix it. 2, construction still has to happen at the bus storage building and at the transportation building. And I don't want to really be driving over new asphalt, because I'd rather do that, and I typically do it at the end of the project, so when we're done and we leave, you've got a brand new, perfectly pristine, good-looking asphalt surface, and no damage, no dirt, no tracks on it or anything. So we'll do the stone and then have it just sit there until August, and then we'll pave it. Then you have a good finished product when we're done.
Hey, Rod, do you think that we can check with the town? Maybe they have some stone they could supply us. Maybe we can swap a load of dirt for a load of stone.
I'm not sure if we can do that because we're under contract with contractors. If we can bring in our own, and we certainly probably have to pay the town to haul it, or we certainly get it at a reduced rate. I'm not sure, Gary. How did we do the roadway going back there from the town? Didn't they? Or you weren't involved in that?
Yeah, we supplied the material. They supplied the bulldozer or the excavator to do that. In this case, what we need is very specific product. We need number 3 crusher run, and we need number 2 crusher run, and we need 3/4 crusher run. It's very specific stone that we need to do this correctly. And I'm not sure that they have that stockpiled.
We want to make sure it's guaranteed too. So
yeah. And Avon in proximity to the pit is in a good spot because the pit's on number 6 road. It's the Hanson plant over in Honey Falls. So it also saves us on trucking costs because we're not Rochester or Webster or somewhere where they have to truck it a much further distance. So it's around the corner, unfortunately. But as I said, we're reutilizing the stone that we generated last year that we gave to the village. We're just taking it all back now. Right. We're going to take it down to the last stone. No, literally, we are.
Anybody else got any questions for Gary? Concerns? Everyone's good. Okay. So we need a motion to approve the change order, not to exceed $147,000, if I'm reading that correctly.
And just so you know, the 147 was the rough estimate that came in that I had already communicated with the board about. Approximately, the good news is it sounds like it's already moving below that based on the stone, but the exact cost is not fixed yet, but it will not exceed that original estimate.
That's correct.
Okay. I want to make the motion.
I'll make it.
Bob, have a second?
I'll second.
Jim?
Either or.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hey, Gary. You're
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate you making the time.
Gary.
Thanks for the
Good
update.
evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, moving back to item D is discussion on existing and future solar projects in the district. And I take it that does not mean our solar project that we have on our property. These are new, existing and new ones that are in our tax base within the district.
That is correct. It's not ours. So Kristen, feel free to unmute and come in and help me with this as you'd like to. We received a contact from Kevin Overton at Harris Beach. Kevin wanted to alert us to the fact that Helios, an existing vendor or company in the area that's done some solar project, wants to present an additional proposal for pilot. And Kevin asked us to review a conversation with the Board of Education just to gauge our overall culture and feel for doing these types of projects. Are these the type of agreements we continually want to enter into? His thought would be that we've more or less established the market, that we're following a template at this point, but he thought it might be a good time for the board just to have a chance to talk about, how we feel about continuing to engage in these type of renewable energy projects as the community. Did I summarize that portion of it okay, Kristen? There's a second part coming. Mm-hmm. So I think we could probably just start there and collect any additional thoughts in terms of a pilot in lieu of taxes. The way this works is the companies frequently want to fix some of their costs coming in. So rather than being assessed right out of the gate, they make a pilot in lieu of tax, payment in lieu of taxes, I'm sorry. And typically the established template that we've been following is approximately $1,000 per kilowatt with a 2% escalator built in per year. For the length of pilots ranges, but Kristen thought it was 15 years tends to be the typical pilot. And then after that period of time, then the company comes back up the assessment rolls, but allows them to fix their cost at the beginning of a project.
I think Kristen kind of, when we discussed this last time, mentioned that, we already have solar panels on our, in our lot. So to turn them down kind of sends a little bit of a mixed signal when we're trying to, we're using renewable energy right here, at our district level. And I know a lot of the farmers around us are benefiting from being able to put the solar projects in. That's just some input that I had.
What's the alternative to a pilot?
They just pay for, I think, the current.
Oh, froze up on us, Kristen. Rodney, I could check into that, but I think the implication is initially they pay for the initial assessed value, and then that just continues to go as it. Kristen, why don't you go ahead and answer, because I'm not exactly sure of the answer I was providing.
I think you cut out. Did I explain my response?
You cut
Yeah,
out.
you froze.
Why don't you just repeat yourself so they get accurate?
Did I freeze?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. What did I say? Oh, I said that we would just be receiving the value, the land value, which is mostly like agricultural land. So there really wouldn't be a lot of revenue. It'd just be normal. So this is an additional revenue for the school district, and the company that owns the solar panels will be making revenue. So they're paying it forward with the different municipalities.
So it's not assessed for the actual value?
No, that's why we do the pilot.
Yeah. So there's pros and cons for the pilot. Obviously, the pilot doesn't help our formula base for our tax cap. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that's the give and take. So
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that the rest of the board understands.
Yeah. My question was had to do with the length of the pilot, and Kristen, you did answer that at 15.
Yes.
Is there any implication for us to benefit if we went with 10 years versus 15? Or you said 15 is pretty typical. I just didn't know if that had any negative impact on us long term in terms of our planning and revenues and things like that.
So the two that we have signed right now are both for 15 years.
Okay.
So I think that was the standard, and unless we could talk to Harris Beach about benefits, can't think of any right now.
Okay.
I think the converters, on ours, our converters have to be switched over between 15 and 20 years. So that's an expense that they're going to have at that point in time. So that might be why. And then the panels are supposedly 40 years, but they wear like a tire. So at year 20, they're only giving 50% out or whatever.
Yeah.
They
reduce their usage by.
But we're going to get more money than what we're currently getting on the property that's there. The downside is it takes that money that was in our cap is gone now. The assessed valuation of that property is not in our what I want to say?
Our assessment base.
Yeah, in the assessment base. So I guess Kristen's, your recommendation is that we go with a pilot because we'll make more money, correct?
Yeah.
Will this be attached to the current one we have?
It would be a separate agreement.
Yeah.
Well, it's the location of the panels.
No.
So these are
the one we have here on campus. No, it would be an off-campus project.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's owned by it's not owned by us.
Yeah, ours is a different animal all by itself. We're going to have to talk about it in a few years about having a reserve set up to do some repairing and changes on that whenever it gets to its lifespan. If in fact we decide to continue with it or whatever, but that's for the future for you guys to think about.
So for this portion of the conversation, I feel like what Kristen and I can take back to Kevin is we've had the discussion. It sounds like we still have an orientation towards supporting this type of work. We're also a partner in this with some other taxing agencies as well. So it's not just with the school, but we are a part of that project and, the economy for the region. So that's a good thing. But it does sound like you want us to ask and explore like what might be implications for shorter or longer term contracts or pilots, just to have the information. So
I guess because we had those other two, and I didn't know like if all at the same time, if staggering some of those would have any benefit or not. It's not my wheelhouse, so I was just asking.
Yep. So it'd be good for us.
I don't know what it was.
It'd be good for us to have the answer to that though and understand it. So we'll go ahead and inquire and bring that information back. I'm keeping a half an eye on the clock because we need to get to a graduation COVID-19 discussion also. There's a second part of the solar project discussion, which is Harris Beach believes that we're going to be presented with another solar project from a company called Nextera. They're new to getting into in the upstate and Northeast. The issue that Kevin and Laura Purcell wanted us to discuss is Nextera is represented in New York State by Harris Beach's Albany office. They want us to have an awareness of that and have the opportunity to discuss what could be perceived as a conflict of interest with Harris Beach representing both parties. They said the solution, if we are not comfortable with that right now, the solution would be that we would have to recommend other counsel for each end, so they wouldn't be able to represent Nextera at the Albany end or represent us at this end, and we'd have to seek other counsel in order to move forward. Kevin and Laura are being very proactive in terms of getting this potential conflict out to us so that we would have a chance to discuss it. In our casual conversation with Kristen, Kevin, and myself, we kind of resorted back to the idea that for most of these pilots, the market has been set. That what the company is going to make is going to vary by company, but the agreements that they enter into with the various municipalities are typically pretty standard at this point. So there's not a lot of exposure in terms of manipulation of the contract, Harris Beach being involved at both ends. The template's kind of set, and if it veered off that template when proposed, then we would revisit the conversation if we were to stay involved now. But now would be a good time if we are completely uncomfortable being involved with our council and the vendor's council being the same, then we'd want to opt out now.
I'm comfortable
at this point.
Any other board members?
I think I might have talked over you, Rodney. What did you say?
Oh, I just said I'm comfortable with Harris Beach at both ends of it, based on the fact that these contracts are all very, very, very similar. And if in fact it comes back and it's way out of whack, we can say no and then have to break out and do something different.
Are there implications to that, Rodney? Like if you have to break out, or is that just no, you just get other counsel?
No, I think we can go get other counsel if something is really completely out of tune with the way that the projects have been going.
I mean, it would be a slight, chance. I'm just saying if if that happened, is there any implications? But if it's a quick, we need to get other counsel, and obviously,
I think if we get other counsel, I think the other company would too. Harris Beach would back out then, but I think they're asking us if we're comfortable. If we're not comfortable at all with Harris Beach representing both, we need to speak up now so that we each place can seek new counsel, I guess.
No, I just wanted to ask if there was any implications, if that rare chance occurred, that you needed to seek other counsel.
As far as maybe cost, because Harris Beach will be doing work for us initially, and then if we decide not to, we'd have to hire somebody else. So there would probably be a cost factor.
I think there's a potential cost factor, but that's probably going to be fairly standard. Still, it's still going to be an expense. And the other potential cost is working with a council that doesn't know our history as well, and the history of the agreements that we've been in as well. I'm comfortable staying in. I think the fact that Kevin and Laura were reaching out very early says something already. And level. And we still have an out if something comes in, if the proposal that we receive is completely out of whack with what has been the regional standard.
Okay.
And it's not like Kevin and Laura are going to be working with both companies. Care Speech down wherever they're at has their own, it's the same firm, but they have their own attorneys that would work on that, and they would be working with Kevin, he is the expert on property and stuff like that.
Sounds like there'd be many eyes on it, in addition to what, with Harris Speech.
Yeah, it's not like it's one attorney that's representing both. So
Sure.
it's one attorney firm representing both. But
Thank you.
Jim, Bob,
Well, I think if they're comfortable, and I know it would be tough for me, but if we have a way to get out of it, if it comes up in the wrong package that we believe won't work for us, I guess it would be all right for me.
I agree. I'm comfortable with it, knowing that especially with how they reached out early, and we know that if we need to change changing circumstances, we can do so. But at this point, I'm comfortable.
Same. They're being very open and transparent, so appreciate that.
Yes.
that's you're good.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sounds like we're good.
Great. So we'll take that information regarding the solar projects back to Kevin and Laura and give you an update when we have some more information.
Great. Okay. Moving on, our last item for our board discussion, and that is the COVID-19 update.
Two real updates for COVID-19. One is easy, quick. That is more or less just a heads up. I'm in discussion. Kristen and I are both in discussion with the Administrators Association and the CSEA in regards to vacation day usage and how that was impacted by COVID-19. So many people had vacation scheduled for spring break. They didn't get to take those vacations. They may be in a position at the end of the year where they have more vacation days than they're allowed to carry over, and they really didn't have a chance to take the vacation days either. Just before the meeting, Rob sent me an email that said that the Administrators Association is largely set based on the existing contract language. With CSEA, they have a really complicated agreement around their carryover, but long story short is I've been working with Mike Farrell to do an MOA that would allow them to carry over more days than they can typically carry over, and typically they're allowed to carry over some, and whatever they don't use by September 1st gets automatically converted into sick days. So what we would allow them to do is carry over more than they're typically allowed to carry over. And instead of having to use them by September 1st, because there still may be restrictions on such things, allow them to use them up until the end of October. And it'd be just for this duration. It wouldn't be any sort of precedent setting. It would just allow them to not be forced to use vacation days, just to use them, or to lose them if they didn't get a chance to use them. And it's just simply trying to allow for the pandemic and how it might have impacted someone's travel plans. And by opening up till October, we may increase the likelihood that they can actually go someplace they want to go to. So that's more or less just a heads up that I'm working on that MOA. We are working on that MOA with CSEA. And then the next part of COVID-19 is, I know we're getting a lot of pressure and some desire to clarify what we're going to do for graduation. This has been a hard, very emotional challenge to try to figure out. So I know I've been trying to slow play it and let the market sort of settle and what is everybody else doing, what's going to be allowed, and then figure out where we want to go. As part of the senior focus groups that Mr. Wagner and I did, the students said that they wanted to do something as close to a traditional graduation as possible. So we were in conversation with them, and that's guided a lot of our thinking. It was hard for us to envision doing something differently, and that's when we've had that feedback. There's lots of buzz, and we've even talked about the drive-in. The drive-in is helping us with our senior bash and our slideshow and our awards. Both Mr. Wagner and I have picked up on a little bit of, I'm not trying to say anything negative, but a little bit of a reluctance on the part of the drive-through to maybe want to be a good partner with us in terms of planning a graduation. And I think that's fine. This is a pandemic that's impacting lots of businesses differently, and they haven't come right out to say that, but it's just, it hasn't been, and Ryan probably has a little bit more information. It hasn't been met with excitement, I guess, is kind of what I would say. Plus, there's a lot of schools using a drive-in, and I think, that makes me want to do something a little bit different. So Ryan, Tom LeGrew, and I have developed a stadium proposal that would allow for the graduates in a nutshell. It would be the graduates on the field, people in the stadium, and then the graduates surrounded on the field with all spaced out graduation. It would give us a capacity of around, give or take, around 500 total people, with 100 graduates and then 4 guests per student. We ran that idea, and everybody would be spaced out. There'd be lots of, we would limit parking to half the parking of our total capacity, which would be about 300 spots total. And we ran that idea, that proposal I developed. We worked together to write up a proposal. We sent it to Dr. Collins, and we sent it to Livingston County Department of Health to get their medical opinion. They are not allowed to approve or deny such proposals. They don't have that authority, but they can offer their medical opinion. They both gave some good feedback. The county health department was worried about hugging, and Dr. Collins was worried about ingress and egress and keeping people spaced, while they're moving into the stadium. But they both thought it looked like good plans. Then I ran it past Laura Purcell to try to find out some of the implications there. And she likes the plan. She thinks it's a safe plan. However, executive order language doesn't allow for non-essential gatherings greater than 10. Now, there's a good chance that could change in time, but that's kind of a bit of a wild card when we think about doing planning. I find it ridiculous that we can gather hundreds of cars for an optional ceremony at a drive-in, and that's not called a gathering, because people are in their individual cars, or literally thousands of people can gather in Central Park and spaced out circles. But if they're not there together, that's not called a gathering, but our stadium graduation would be called a gathering. She's not excited about the possibility of violating the current executive order. So I've set the table that way. That's been the one we've spent a lot of time working on, but Mr. Wagner is working his tail off, and he also has a plan and some great ideas for what would be a drive-through type on-campus, replicating the drive-in experience kind of graduation. But those are the two options that we're really thinking about right now. And I want to turn it over to Mr. Wagner to talk a little bit more about the dates and the timing and some of the rationale leading us to what we want to try to zero in on as a possible plan.
Sure. So we initially talked about the date and potentially moving it up. But as Dr. Piketty shared, the guidelines, they haven't really changed. And as we're getting pushed closer and closer, we're looking at June 27th. We had talked a little bit about potentially moving it back into July or August. I've got some student perceptions on that, and had some conversations there. And I think based on the feedback and what we're seeing at the school is, I feel like we've been out since March 13th, and the longer we wait, the longer, especially the seniors, are going to become more disconnected. So I'm pretty committed to making it happen on June 27th, our scheduled date for graduation. And what I worry about is if we put it off, we get a group of seniors who might say, just mail me the diploma. I've already kind of moved on and thinking about college. And, that's the big concern. I think we have a great opportunity, regardless of if it's in the stadium or if we're able to do a drive-through ceremony on campus. We have a great opportunity to bring everybody together and close out the year and celebrate together. So I'd love to see us keep it on June 27th. I'm hoping we can get a rain date on June 28th, if that works. And I think no matter what, there's going to be outside components to the ceremony. So we'll need a rain date to make sure that we can do it. And hopefully, I know we're in upstate New York, but hopefully it doesn't rain 2 days in a row. I think we deserve some luck. But as far as that, I think that's our best chance to celebrate together as class of 2020 and honor them with their families.
In addition to trying to plan for a second contingency date, I think it's hard to ask families to plan for 2 possible weekends and then need 2 possible dates on each of those weekends, depending on what the venue could be. So, we're thinking that for the sake of families doing their planning, that the best thing we can do is really target and communicate around the 27th and 28th. Mr. Wagner and I, mostly Mr. Wagner, will continue planning 2 graduations as he's been doing. Because if something breaks, we would rather be outside in the stadium. What we would want to do is probably shorten the ceremony a little bit because of then some of the environmental factors that might be at play, either proximity or even just heat. If we could move it up from 11 to 10 in the morning to keep it a little cooler. I don't know if you've been out on that turf. It does get a little bit warmer than a typical grass field if it happens to be hot. But without knowing for certain the executive orders will allow us to be on the field, we have to keep planning the alternative graduation also. But so we wanted to share with you some of the thinking, some of what we've been kicking around and into along the way, and really kind of give you the heads up that we're really going to target the weekend of the 27th and 28th, and move forward on that for the reasons that Ryan shared.
The other quick thing, sorry. The other quick thing just to add too is I know limiting the number of guests is going to be tough for some families or siblings and grandparents. So Jim Ellis has secured somebody to live stream the graduation, so they could watch it.
And I just want to give a quick shout out to Toth Sporting Goods. They do all of our scoreboards. They've been doing our scoreboards. Mm-hmm. They were quick to respond with a public address system that could be used in the outdoor venues also, and a really modest fee. It's one they happen to sell, but he came out to demo it, and he'd be willing to come out and demo it again on the graduation date. So that was really good customer service on his part.
I thought it was a great proposal, the stadium one.
Yeah.
Well, things might change between now and then, too. I'm sure the governor's really been hit with a lot of questions about that.
Yep. And
okay.
From what we understand, the authority to make this decision and make it allowable completely relies with the executive right now. Health departments have been clearly informed that they don't have the authority to approve or deny plans.
But it seems like there's interpretation on that groups of 10, like groups of 10, because they're within, they're not keeping their 6 feet distance. So that's a group of 10 that are close together, and we are keeping the distance. So
actually, I think the group of 10 was only approved for the Memorial Day weekend, not extended through. But this Friday, we're supposed to go to phase 2. And if we do, what that's going to mean, we don't know yet. He was supposed to say it today, but he didn't. So,
right. But the group of 10 is where you're not social distancing. You could have a group of 10.
Still had to be social distancing, but 10 people can be around. You still have to be 6 feet apart.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the other suggestions to celebrate Memorial Day was to
look like that.
Get your bands out on the field and record them performing out on the athletic field. So you can have a band out on the field playing, but that's not a gathering. It's just the lack of consistency.
Yeah.
And to think that an Avon spaced out graduation would be any less safe than Central Park right now just seems silly to me. But I don't get to make those decisions yet. Okay.
We got 5 minutes yet before we have to open the public hearing. So we'll move on to reports. President's report. I just want to say that Dr. Petty last night presented to the Rotary Club the budget. Did very well. I know Rob was there. I don't know. Julie wasn't there, but they had a few questions, which he answered very well. So one other thing, just as information at last night's meeting, we also made the decision that we're canceling the Corn Festival this year, so it will not be a 34th Corn Festival. I think there'll be something in a penny saver about that, but we're looking at what they can do, maybe in a social distancing way, what we can do, but very, very tough decision. So I told somebody there they have to notify the school that we're not going to be using the parking lot. So I'm not sure who's going to do that. But anyways, moving on. Legislative. Julie, you have anything?
Julie, you're muted. That's going to cost you a quarter.
Yep.
Oh,
It's
am I
a
on?
dollar Rotary.
Yeah.
Okay. Mary Metheny reached out to me. There's going to be a roundtable in Albany via Zoom next Friday. I'm going to be meeting with Ryan Piketty on Wednesday to kind of go over questions. The Board of Regents Chancellor Betty Rosa is going to be there, and the interim commissioner Shannon Tahoe, and they are going to be talking about how to reopen schools. And they wanted to know from the superintendent and administrators some of their main concerns that we as there's 12 board members throughout New York State that will be participating, and so we need to bring those concerns forward. So I wanted to add the administrators in on this if they had concerns, specific concerns about reopening that you wanted me to bring forward, that I would be happy to do that. You could just email me, any of those concerns that you might have. It's going to go from 11 to 1:30 next Friday, and I can certainly take great notes and share that information out.
Julie,
And Ryan,
I'm going to have it as an agenda item for the administrative meeting on Friday to discuss
Okay.
it. So we can collect it all and send you one email. Would that work for you?
Sure. What time? This Friday? So tomorrow?
Yep. And so I would have it collected 2 days from now, right? Today's Wednesday. I would have it collected and I could pass it along to you when we meet next week.
Thank you.
My CSO colleagues regionally too.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, Ryan could get that from the CSO meeting. It's going to be area 1 and area 2, but I tell them I cover them no matter what. So those superintendents will give Ryan an earful, and then he'll give them all to you. So
Great. I can't wait. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else, Julie?
That's it for now.
Okay. I think maybe we better stop there, and I think it's 5 o'clock.
Yep.
And I will officially open the public hearing on the budget. I don't know if we have any guests that's joined us. Do you know, Jim?
We do.
Yep, I think we do.
Yes, we have 3 guests currently.
All right. Well, welcome to those guests. I can't see all of you or hear you, but welcome. In just a moment, I'm going to turn the hearing over to Dr. Ryan Piketty to go over the complete budget. I would ask if you have any questions on that budget, please write them down. We will answer any questions that you have afterwards. We'll go back into the slides if you see something that you want to relook at or something, but we'll give Dr. Piketty a chance to get through the presentation and then answer all your questions. So thank you for joining us, and Dr. Piketty, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, Rodney, and thank you everyone for joining the budget hearing in a very unique fashion. This is certainly an interesting presentation. So what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, is I have the presentation up on the screen. I'm going to share my screen and go through the budget presentation. I have about 16 slides. I anticipate it'll take me about 15 minutes to get through the budget presentation. And if you heard the presentation before, where I invited conversations during the presentation, I think for the sake of getting start to finish conversation around the budget, if you could hold your questions till the end, I'd be happy to refer back to the slides and move from there. But I'd like the questions at the end if you don't mind. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and take over the meeting. Alrighty, so if I've done this correctly, you should be seeing the budget hearing and Board of Education presentation. I can still see most of you, so if you can give me a thumbs up if that's what you have. Great, thank you very much. I want to go, I'm going to move quickly through the introduction part of this. I was going to introduce myself depending on how many folks are here, but most of you have heard my spiel about my introduction before, so I'll move over that when I get to that. I'm going to deliver the budget presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Board of Education information, and then the overall format that we've talked about, where I'll give the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. I'm skipping the introduction. This was a slide that I shared a little bit about who I am. I'd be happy to meet
Brian,
with anyone to go
we
over it.
lost your slide.
You can no longer see my slide?
No.
I can.
Oh,
I can.
Yeah, I still have it too. Yeah.
oh, I guess it's just me. Go ahead.
Thanks, Rodney. On the next slide, this is the budget strategic objectives from the Board of Education. So this is work that the Board of Education did before I started. There are several strategic objectives that they try to hit when they're doing the budget planning for the district. They want to be proactive, or we want to be proactive in the maintenance of facilities. That is to continually put a little time and energy and effort into the facilities that we have, so we avoid the catastrophic replacements and malfunctions that we might have to address later. We want our spending to be guided by the mission and vision of the school, and we want to maintain the long-term financial health of the school district. So these are budget strategic objectives that are in place before I started, and they've been listed on some of the documents for the strategic planning of the district. As we started working through the budget process this year, a few meetings back, we talked some about our core values and some of our budget values. So some beliefs that would guide some of the decision making that we have to make in tougher times. We want the budget to be responsive to need. We want the resources to be dedicated to the goals that we're trying to accomplish. We want to focus on student learning. Student learning is the fundamental purpose of school, so we want to stay focused on that. We want to be forward thinking. Even in these tough times, this became a really strange budget season to work through. So we want to make sure that we continue to stay forward thinking and how do we continuously improve, even though some of our access to resources may be being compromised in the short term. And we want to value the community support and input. So when I say value community support and input, I'm referring to the support that's been in place for a long time over the years for the Avon School District from the community. Some of the immediate support that we've received in the last few weeks as we've dealt with this pandemic, and also some of the input. About a year and a half ago, the Legacy Planning Project was started, and there were some community surveys conducted at that time. We as a leadership team have been looking through that information, and we're trying to be responsive to some of the requests that were coming through. For example, the desire for improvements to the technology in the district were really clearly stated about 18 months ago. And we were excited that through the Smart Bond Act, we've been able to make some improvements on that, but we still have a ways to go. So that's the type of input that I'm talking about when we've reached out with surveys in the past to respond to what the community is expressing to us. In typical budget years, the process is fairly linear. Most of you have more experience with this than I do, but the process tends to be pretty linear. It starts with a rollover budget. So what would it cost us next year to do what we've done this year? And we form some approximate costs for a school budget that way. Then we start moving into what are the current mandates that we have to address. So things that are put on the plate that we have to address because they're part of education, either law or regulation. We also think about our aspirations. What are the things we want to accomplish that we may not be doing currently, and they may be outside of what we are being told we have to do. We go through a series of budget presentations by department at Board of Education meetings where information is presented and shared on a year-to-year cost. And then typically what happens at the state level is there's an executive proposal from Governor Cuomo over the last last decade or so. And that executive proposal almost always comes in low. And that kicks off a process of advocacy, legislation, and ultimately some conversation and compromise that happens that usually results in some budget augmentation for the school districts, all school districts. So usually what gets settled on as part of the state budget is higher than what was proposed by the governor initially. So that's the part of the usual process. Then New York State finalizes its budget, and once that happens, we get our final New York State, our aid run from the state. For Avon, our state aid represents about 47% of our budget. The tax levy represents another 47%, and then the remaining amount of 5 or 6% comes from other revenue sources. So it's about a 50-50 split between tax levy and state aid. So then once we have that state aid number, we finalize our budget and we go to make a budget recommendation to the Board of Education. The Board of Education adopts a budget, and then it goes out to vote along with the Board of Election vote. While all of this is happening, those circles that you see, those kind of half arrows that you see, it's a recursive process that's going on as we clarify costs with, for instance, some of our out-of-district placement students. We clarify costs of some of the contracts that we might be working on. We are communicating with the Board of Education and as a leadership team, trying to figure out do our long-term planning for the following year. We're trying to advocate for some additional needs that we might have. We're trying to create efficiencies. Are there cheaper ways we can do what we're doing? And we're also discussing some additional possibilities as a district. So that's what typically is happening in the roughly December-ish through the budget vote time, which is usually mid-May. It's a recursive process. We're going back and forth and clarifying the budget numbers based on what gets set as official amounts. And typically, we know, and many of you know, that the impact of the Avon school budget produces several highlights. We have service learning opportunities, a very strong educational system. We have unique programming for students. We had started a one-to-one instructional initiative. We have a STEAM program and access to a STEAM coach in mostly the elementary schools from K up to 6. We tried it and developed some teaching that involves some authentic applications. And in the high school alone, there are 18 courses that could potentially lead to college credit, which hopefully has a long-term impact for families of helping with some of tuition costs, et cetera. Extra robust number of extracurricular activities, a strong arts program, have numerous athletic accomplishments, unique restorative practice programming, the Braves break that became a bit of was offered with regular intervals this year, and an example of an extracurricular with the Middle School Academic Challenge Bowl. So very, very strong education and a lot of other extracurricular activities is typically what this budget process produces for Avon, and there's a long history of that. Unfortunately, this year's budget, the foundation to creating this year's budget was cracked a little bit. And after the initial executive proposal, that's exactly when the pandemic broke out, and most of the state's response was dedicated to dealing with the pandemic. So as a result, there was no legislative augmentation. There was none of that advocacy and legislation that typically takes place. So when the when the state budget was finalized, it came with what I'll call some strings attached. There's a provision called executive cost containment. And what that says is when the budget was finalized and we received our state aid run, we were given a tentative promise of what that state aid run would be, a certain amount of money. But it also, in the fine print, said, we're probably not going to be able to give you that exact amount. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the revenues coming into the state on April 30th, June 30th, and December 31st. And if we're not getting within 1% of what we predict as the revenues, then we're going to take action on this executive cost containment measure. So we're going to review the assessment stream. And if we don't have the money to give to you, we're going to adjust your state aid level downward, unless there's legislative action. So unless the state legislature can form a counter proposal to prevent that from happening, which nobody thinks will actually happen, then you're not going to receive the amount of money that we said we are going to give you. It's going to go down. And the real challenge for this is the amount is not known, the timeline for impact is not known, and there's discussion of a federal stimulus, but that's really well beyond our control. So we have to do a plan based on the information that we have. So it's made planning very, very challenging. So you heard in the Board of Education meeting this year, prior, Kristen Murphy mentioned the idea that for the first time, Tom DiNapoli was talking about withholding or delaying or shrinking aid payments for this year. And that's the first time that that's really come up as an impact to this year's school budget. So there's just really a lot of unknown into this budget process. However, we took all of that, and because we've been working our normal process and having some conversations, we've put together what we feel is a responsible school budget that we can bring to the community that protects a lot of our programs, but also makes use of some creative thinking. So on a year-to-year basis, when we think about the state aid that we're receiving, you'll notice that the state aid is down approximately $227,000. That's a great deal of money, but some of that was expected in the form of building aid that we're not receiving, and we knew we weren't going to receive. Our other revenues stays about the same. Things like Medicaid payment, like the Barilla payment, stays about the same. This transfer from reserves, this is a reserve that is, we typically were planning to use $20,000 for retirement reserve, and it also allows for $100,000 from the capital reserve. The fund balance appropriation last year was $200,000. We plan to allocate $280,000 from the unallocated fund balance at the end of this year, and that is done in an effort to keep the tax levy down, to be creative now and be proactive now in order to minimize the impact of the community. So with that in place, the tax levy is always interesting. The maximum allowable tax levy for us this year was really pretty high. It was 3.79%. So in years past, I'm sure other superintendents have explained the allowable tax levy. It's calculated with a complex formula that gets the school district to a max allowable tax levy. And the items that go into the calculation are some of the economic factors that are taking place in the community. So based on this formula, which addresses some of the economic factors in the community, our allowable levy was going to be as high as 3.79%, because it's recognized that the district may need some opportunity to recoup some of the funds that are, because of the strains that are being placed on the district elsewhere in this formula. However, based on the planning that we've done, trying to be proactive by accessing revenues and being proactive by allocating a larger amount from the fund balance, we've been able to keep that tax levy to 1.98%. So that's about 48%, just 48% of the allowable levy is what we're trying to do in order to be responsible and prudent with our budget planning for the year. And so that gets us to the maximum spending plan amount here of $20,756,651. And that is just 0.67% over the spending plan from last year, which 0.67% is a pretty strong year-to-year performance in terms of how we've been able to contain some of the costs and create some efficiencies. I want to highlight some of the things about the budget. I've talked a lot about the darkness of the budget and some of the planning, but one of the things that we're excited about is that we've been able to do a great deal of proactive planning, even though we're being fiscally responsible. Education Law 2D, we're addressing that through our budget. This is an information and privacy mandate. It's an unfunded mandate from the state where we have to look out for student and staff information privacy. So our budget planning has helped us to address that. We found efficiencies and created efficiencies by working the request for proposal process for our contracts, most notably occupational therapy, physical therapy, and transportation. By receiving new proposals, those proposals and the contracts that we awarded came in approximately $120,000 over what we had planned to spend. And each of those contracts are being awarded on a 3-year basis. The budget plans to expand some career opportunities through partnerships and career exploration available to us through Genesee Valley Educational Partnership. We're preserving some of our unique programs like restorative practices and the STEAM program. We're connecting resources to initiatives. I want to talk a little bit about the initiative around one-to-one instruction. This is the opportunity for students to have computers and for us to deliver instruction and support our instruction through the use of computers. So some of what we're going to try to do with this year's budget is increase our level of support. Those computers were made possible through the Smart Bond Act and through the planning done before I started, but we're planning to support the use of those devices in order to further our initiative. We're going to leverage some existing grants through the entitlement grants. We're going to move some of the things that we typically fund from the general fund into some of the grants to minimize the impact to the general fund. So I want to emphasize that we're excited about just a 0.67% year-to-year spending increase from last year. And our tax levy is coming in at 48% below the allowable tax levy of 3.79%. So if you go back to if you were to when you get a chance, go back to that slide that talks about the budget values that we have. I can click back there quickly. We feel really good that our budget has done these things. We're responding to need, where resources are aligned to our initiative. We're focused on student learning. We're trying to be forward thinking, even though it's tough times. And we're trying to value the community in terms of minimizing expenses and decreasing that levy, but also valuing the input that has come our way in terms of recommendations for improving our program. So we feel good about the responsibility we've shown in creating this budget. I talked a little bit about supporting initiatives, and so I feel like I need to highlight this integration specialist position that we're creating by reassigning a current staff position. That we have a retirement from the reading department this year, and that reading position is going to be reassigned to be a person who supports the technology-based instruction. So it's being done at less than a budget neutral because of the retirement. There's going to be breakage in the hiring process. So it'll be less than budget neutral in order to create this position, and it'll provide more resources and support for our one-to-one student computer teaching initiative. This person will also have a role in helping with professional learning. It'll help us with industry standards in terms of managing devices, and there'll definitely be a role for infusing more technologically based skills that graduates of the 21st century are going to need. So the overall budget propositions, there are 5. There's the overall spending plan, the overall budget. The first 3 are bolded on your screen because they are budget proposals that the community is used to seeing. So there's the overall budget proposal. There's the bus purchase, and then I have this label existing funds in EF. So what we plan to do, because it's a capital purchase, we need voter approval in order to spend the money on the school bus. And what we would plan to do is purchase that school bus in cash from existing funds at the end of this year. So that would be, we just need a permission to spend the funds in that way. The funds already exist. The third proposition is the vehicle and equipment reserve from 2009. This proposition is the result of the Board of Education's long-term planning to set aside money to help to plan for and smooth the impact of some of the long-term expenses related to high-ticket items, such as vehicles. So for instance, one of the big ticket items in this is a new truck that can be fitted with a spreader, and we can actually decrease our fleet by modernizing a truck that's more multi-purpose. It also includes some of the furniture for the flexible seating arrangement, as well as some other items for furniture in the various buildings. But this is existing money. In the past, the community gave us the approval to set the money aside, and we just simply need community approval to spend the money that already exists. So those first 3 are fairly standard propositions for Avon. The fourth proposition is a capital reserve for technology purchase. So similar to the reserve that I just talked about, what this will allow us to do is start an account that we can fund through existing funds, no new money again, in order to help us plan for replacement costs of technological items. The amount of technology in schools has grown exponentially. We've just deployed more than 700 computers to our students and families. Those computers were paid for through the Smart Bond Act. Then what this reserve would allow us to do is start planning for the replacement of those items. So we can have the money. Again, we couldn't spend any of the money that we fund this without coming back and getting taxpayer approval to spend the money. So we need approval to start the account, and we'll also need approval to spend the money once it's funded. And then the fifth proposition is on behalf of the Avon Free Library. This is a mechanism that comes up from time to time where we levy a tax on the library's behalf. And the way the process works, it needs to be approved by the public. Once approved by the public, we levy the tax on the library's behalf, we collect the funds, and then we write a check to the library. It doesn't come up all of the time. It comes up with some regularity, but this is a year that we're partnering with the library to try to make this happen. In addition to the budget vote that I've spent most of my time on, there's also the process of voting on Board of Education officials, our members. This year, there are 2 seats open for 3-year terms. The first seat is held by Bob DeBrucker. He is running unopposed, and there is space for a write-in. The second seat is held by our current board president, Rodney George. He is running unopposed, and there is space for a write-in. The budget vote this year, I thought I was going to another slide. I want to talk a little bit about the timeline. I have this executive cost containment highlighted here, and then I have the dates crossed out because each one of those dates was a date that we were supposed to learn some of the impact of the executive cost containment. And all of those dates have come and gone without any information to us other than the latest from Tom DiNapoli saying we might lose money from this year also. The latest thinking is rumors that we may not hear until the end of June when that second revenue assessment date comes. That's when we may hear the overall impact. So instead of being able to really examine the impact of that, we've applied a lot of conservative logic to try to get us to where we need to be in terms of managing the budget. The Board of Education adopted a budget on the 18th of May. I've been engaged in what I call the education phase of teaching the community and about the school budget. I've presented to community organizations. I had a great, Mr. George mentioned the Rotary Club last night. Last week, I had a really great presentation with the Lions Club. And I've done my Facebook broadcast, and I've covered a lot of this information previously in the Facebook broadcast. That we sent the ballots. As you know, it's a completely write-in process this year. We mailed the ballots yesterday. We've received some phone calls today that the ballots have been received. So we're excited that they're reaching the destination. We posted the newsletter yesterday. We posted it on the district website. I emailed it out via school messenger, and I also sent it out via the school's faculty and staff communication. But it is available on the district website if you want to go to the district website to get a copy of it, or you could email the district clerk and we will be happy, or myself, and we'll be happy to send you a copy of it. A hard copy is coming as part of the Penny Saver circulation this weekend. So the newsletter is posted and it's being sent via the Penny Saver. This is the budget hearing, and the Board of Education vote is happening on June 9th. We have sent the ballots with all of the proposition. The ballots need to be received back to the school by 5 p.m. on June 9th in order to count towards the process. So whatever you can do to get your ballots in the mail, probably by Friday the 5th, that'll give plenty of time for them to be returned to us. However, if something comes up, we will have a drop box available on the day of the election, and we'll have some information on the website about how that's going to work. But whatever, the postage is paid, so all you'd have to do is put it in the envelope provided and send it back to us. We're still wrestling with some unknowns. Just wanted to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about spring events and end of school. We've been communicating a couple of pieces of information about what the end of school might look like. As this is happening, we don't know what September opening is going to plan. We don't know about fall sports. We don't know about the impact and costs of new measures that we may have to put in place to follow additional guidelines that are sure to come our way in terms of when school reopens next year. So that is an additional cost that we really don't necessarily know what it's going to look like right now. And that kind of thinking has factored into putting together the budget that we've prepared for the public vote. The last thing that I'll mention one more time is we don't know the implications of state aid. We've been given a promise of an amount, but we know we're not going to receive that amount. So we've tried to make some necessary reductions to what we anticipate as state aid. We've reduced what we think right out of the gate. We're already assuming we're not going to receive at least $150,000 of state aid, and we've done our planning accordingly. If the budget were not to pass, just at the board meeting previous to this, I want to just mention briefly, I do not have a slide for it, but if the budget were not to pass in the contingency budget process, a couple of immediate impacts would happen. One is the revenue associated with the capital outlay project would come out of the budget, and any community funding, funding that we do for community usage of facilities would have to come out. So that would be, for example, the fitness center, weight room, and the pool. About $20,000 worth of expense would immediately come out. And when the revenue is taken out and the expenditures are taken out, we end up with a budget gap of an additional $178,000 that we would have to cover by we'd have to cover those expenses in some way, shape, or form. So that would involve some additional planning on the part of the Board of Education and the leadership team to prioritize further what we would do in the event that the budget were to go down. So hopefully, I've been talking for a bit. I'm going to take a sip of water here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can answer for anyone in the presentation. But I think it might be best if I were to stop sharing my screen to answer questions.
They may want to refer to a slide, Ryan, also.
I can do that, Ronnie, by keeping it, it's easier for me if I keep it up on my screen down here, and then I can see everyone in the field if there's a question. But I can automatically present it again too.
So I know we
So-
have some guests. Does someone want to ask a question or have a question for their on the
And
budget?
I'll just interject for our guests that they'll have to unmute themselves. I'm not able to unmute for them. So if you just go ahead and unmute, and we'll take the first speaker. Looks like
I see.
Mr. Amy.
I just have a comment. As I received my ballot today, I've never received an absentee ballot today, and I almost put it back in the mail without signing the envelope. And I know
Yes.
the district has rarely had a lot of absentee ballots. So for those who are listening, again, be sure to sign the envelope or your ballot doesn't count.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for that. We'll see if I can, I'll try to emphasize that in some of my subsequent communications.
I know Don Maston, I know you're on there and you're usually one that has a question or for those who don't know Don was a previous mayor in the village and has been worked with the ambulance as a president for quite some time. And then now I think he's just enjoying retirement. But any questions for us, Don? If you're muted, if you're talking, we can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
If anyone is interested in unmuting, sometimes if you just take the cursor and move it to the bottom of the screen, a couple of a white bar will pop up and there's a microphone, a phone, and a camera there. And you would just, if you see the slash through it, you could just click it and it unmutes or turns on the camera.
Nobody have any questions or comments?
Mr. Ellis is waiting. Mr. Ellis?
I think he froze. Oh,
You're not going to believe it, Jim. Right in front of everybody. Another quarter.
If I could, I'd just again like to say that I think the board and the administrative team, given all the things that we have going on, have done a great job. I'm really pleased that the library is able to put this request out to go with the levy, and I think you've done a great job explaining that as I read it in the newsletter as to why that's there. But I think it's incredibly for looking ahead, planning ahead to create the tech reserve. I certainly hope that people understand that doesn't cost them a dime to create it, but clearly to keep the technology moving, you're going to need to have a way to replenish and review. And so I just think it's great that how you're utilizing your staff with a retirement and creating a position for the instructional specialist there. And I really appreciate all the hard work. Believe me, I know all the hard work the board and the administrative team have done to put together this responsible spending plan.
I'll interject for our two participants that I believe are joining us by phone. To unmute your phone, it's *6.
I'll take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Rebecca Budinger-Mulhern. I'm the library director at the Avon Free Library. I'd like to second what Bruce Amy just shared, but I'd also like to thank you for hosting our proposition on the ballot for the increase to the library funding for the town library. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. In person.
Yes, I do too.
Well, if that's the question, the number of questions that we have, if there's any follow-up, I'd be happy to receive an email or a phone call in terms of if there's any requests for follow-up or additional information. I do want to highlight one more time that the ballots have been sent in the mail with a return postage envelope as part of it. We recommend using that return postage feature to return the envelope. But if something does pop up, there will be a drop slot available on June the 9th. Thank you very much for your participation in this budget hearing. First time through it for me, so I thank you very much for helping to shape the thoughts and for the support that the community has offered to Avon in the past. So there are no more questions. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. George.
Okay. Again, I thank everyone who participated. We are going to move on with our regular board meeting, pick it back up again where we left off. Again, we do have a guest recognition at the end of this section. If someone should come up with a question and want to ask that, if you're still on, be happy to take that question. So thank you. Okay, moving on to the administrators' reports. Let me ask any of the administrators if they have any additional comments or any comments they would like to give to the board. If so, just unmute yourself and. Okay. How about board members? Have any questions for our administrators?
I would just like to point out that I appreciate all the extra work that was done to get the budget through this far, and it's really nice that we're able to do that through this kind of system here. It's different, but it works. So thank you very much.
Rob? Yeah, again, this is
no. I just unmuted just in case I needed to speak.
Quick trigger.
Bob's comment about the budget, and again, most of us can remember what the GEA was a few years back and how long it lasted. The thing about that is, and if Mr. Amy is still on, we knew what we were getting. We knew what we were supposed to get, but then we knew what they were taking away. So we could still create a budget. We knew how much money we were getting. Even though it wasn't what we were supposed to get, we were able to create a budget. This one here has been extremely difficult, especially with the atmosphere and with this COVID, people not working and so on. So we take that into effect, the community, and also not knowing what the state's going to do, what we can plan to do that. So I want to give tremendous kudos to our business official and the superintendent and all the administrators for working on that and getting us to a plan that I think is very well. It serves our students, our faculty, and it keeps us moving forward. So thank you. Any other comments for the administrator?
Do I get a comment now, or are you going to call on me next, Rodney?
I'm going to call on you separately.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the superintendent's report, he may speak now.
I want to thank, obviously I definitely want to thank the leadership team, and I really want to thank Kristen Murphy. I joke about a quarter. The quarter is like, as we do our online meetings, if you forget to unmute before you speak, you have to put a quarter in a jar. So that's, Mr. Ellis is now going to work 4 more years, I think.
That's why I unmuted, just in case.
He is the offender. But so I want to thank the leadership team, and especially Kristen, for all of the work in trying to get to this point. I think I'm really excited about how we've come together to prioritize under tough circumstances where we want to go. And I think what's really helped in that has been the work of the Board of Education, for the district being in the situation that we're in because of the long-term planning that's happened in previous leaders and previous administrations and previous boards of education that have positioned Avon well to weather a storm like this. So not just the long-term planning, but immediately in the time that I've started, your willingness to continue to be forward-thinking even in these hard circumstances has definitely helped us to operate with some clarity and without fear of the immediate impact. We've been able to continue to think long-term because of the support and the guidance that the Board of Education has offered to us through this process also. So I think it's been a very strong team effort, but not just the immediate team, but teams that have existed before that have helped Avon to be in a position that's better than a lot of situations that other schools may be in.
Thank you for that comment. Anybody else? Anything else, Ryan, before we move off of the superintendent's report?
Make sure you vote. Just make sure.
Make sure you sign your envelopes.
Sign your envelope, yes.
All right, so we'll move into the roundtable. Beth?
I don't have anything necessarily. Maybe this is a question for just our group as a board. I know with the, it was nice to get the email that Maya forwarded from Suzanne Freeman and the digital gift for the seniors and asking us to participate. And so it just made me think, is there anything else that as a board we could do, or on the 11th, a place we could be standing, when the seniors ride around, and just, please, if there's something that we can help with, I think as a group we would, show our support and be present for them. And I mean, yes, there's an actual graduation, but again, I just wanted to ask if there was, anything else that with the senior events happening, and especially with the drive around, if there's something that the board could do, or get together and stand together unified in support.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in, but we have to be 6 feet apart.
I know. Well, we'll at least come up with a place. So again, that was, yeah. If Ryan Wagner has any other ideas, he can let Ryan Pichetti know. So thanks.
Yeah, as things firm up, I'll be sure to share anything that comes to mind. One thing pretty quick is we're gonna ask community members. We haven't firmed this up yet, but we're gonna ask them to have their cars park either in Tops or Tom Walls as the students come through to cheer them on. So there might be something the board can do there together as a group to cheer on the students as they leave for the parade. Maybe a spot that you could go make some signs or something like that. That's
yes.
one thing that comes to mind pretty quick, but there may be other things too as we kind of move forward in our planning.
Yeah. So again, I was just, for all of us on the board, thank you for including us with that idea of the digital gift.
Yeah, we could get a 54 passenger bus and we could be 6 feet apart on a bus and have our heads out the windows, or education on a bus.
That's it for me. Nope. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Julie?
Board on a bus.
Hey, that's a new saying, board on a bus. Nothing, Bob?
No, I'm set.
Yeah,
I'm still in though.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm set too, Ed. But just to echo that, the feeling of appreciation. You look at this board packet and you read all the administrative reports and everything that's happening, and it's amazing given the times that we're going through to see so much positive work. I mean, it's just it's impressive to see. We know that we're going through a real difficult time, but to see everyone rally together and again move forward. So for me, it's just I appreciate reading the long board packet that has all that great information, celebrating the work that's being done. So just wanted to say thanks to everyone.
Oh, I do have something.
Okay, Julie?
I look forward to getting back to regular board meetings. Where we can, even if we're socially distanced, it's harder to meet like this, but it's working. So I'm not complaining. I'm just motivated to get back to basics. That's it.
Yep. It's on my end. I don't want to forget that we have, well, not a special guest, but Maya's here, and she has been taking care of us for
a long time.
Yeah. So, I mean, stuffing the envelopes, getting all the stuff ready, you're like an unsung hero that people don't really know what's going on in the background. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's see. Board of Education. All right, moving on to future board meetings. 6/8, which is Monday night, a week from Monday night. And then 6/9 is our budget vote and election. Now, Maya, I still have to come here to open up the hearing, the budget vote?
I have an email in to Laura asking that,
Okay,
so I will let you know.
okay. So I know we still have to have the inspectors and we still have to have someone in charge, whether or not I have to come here and do that. I'm fine with doing it, just need to know if I have to, so.
Yep, I should hear back from her this week.
And then 6/22 is our other meeting after the budget, so. And then I think at the 6/8 meeting, we probably should discuss our annual meeting date. Again, that has to be July 1st to July, well, we'll have to, if we want it other than the first, I think it's the first Tuesday in July. If we want it other than the first Tuesday in July, as a board, we have to choose a date, but it has to be within the first 15 days of July. So think about, I don't think we have to worry about being on vacation. I know in previous years, some of us have been on vacation. I don't think that'll be the case this year. So, and you know, if we choose to do something, but you know, have some ideas and some thoughts, and next meeting we can discuss a possible date when that should occur. Okay, that leads us into our last guest recognition. If anybody has any comments or questions for the board, if there's guests that need to unmute, feel free to do so. I don't hear anybody. Again, if you do have questions or concerns and you don't want to ask fully, you can email Dr. Piketty at the school, and he'll get an answer for you. Other than that, anybody else have anything for the meeting? If there is nothing else for the meeting, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make it.
Beth, I have a second.
I'll second.
Bob, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Oh, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Our
Thanks.
guests
Have a
for
good night.
attending.
Good night,
Have a good night.
Everybody.